to try to get to a series of meetings. The first plane took off from Tripoli, landing in Cairo, and sources are telling us talks are due to take place with the Arab League there. A second plane stopped briefly in Malta before heading on to Lisbon, where Portugal's foreign minister has agreed to have an informal meeting with Gaddafi's envoy. And a third plane stopped briefly in Paris before heading to Brussels, where our sources understand talks may be held with the EU and with NATO. Now, meanwhile, in Tripoli, Anita McNaught has been speaking to Libya's deputy foreign minister.
So who are you going to meet then? Clarify this for me.
No, we actually, officially speaking, we still have a relationship with all these organizations and capitals. But what happened in the last 2 weeks, as I said, because of the defection of two very important ambassadors, the two permanent representatives to United Nations and to the Arab League. Then for quite some time we were cut out from contacting those very important organizations. And that's the reason why we are sending envoys to a number of capitals. And we hope that this resumption of communication will give them a clearer picture on the situation in Libya, because the campaign was very hostile from defeat channels, from certain capitals. And this is just the fighting back.
So you're going to turn up at the United Nations?
Of course, we will send a minister to attend any sessions for the Security Council of Libya, because what happened is really unprecedented. How come a defected person allowed to be part in the meeting against his own government, which appointed him 2 years ago, and he's still using that mandate to attend such meeting? Libyan government still a legitimate one. The Libyan government still controlling more than 90% of the Libyan territory. And even in eastern areas, we still have presence of the local authority and army and police. We know there are problems in Benghazi, Derna, and Baida. But this is not a reason for anyone, to question the legality and the legitimacy of the government of Libya.
Well, let's go now live to the U.S. Nezar Al-Sayed is chair of the Center for Middle East Studies at the University of California at Berkeley, and he's live with us from California. Thank you for being with us. We heard the Deputy Foreign Minister there saying that just because there's some trouble in a couple of cities, that's no reason for the international community to question the legality of the government. Does he have a point?
No, he does not. Absolutely does not. In fact, I find it amazing that he is invoking a framework of legality at a time when Gaddafi and his entire regime was brought to power initially as a result of a military coup. The last
but you can't bring up a military coup of 40 years ago to question his legality when the United Nations, when the United States, when the European Union all embraced Gaddafi only a few years ago.
Well, I think they embraced Gaddafi under very specific conditions of international relations that prevailed at that very specific moment in time. The situation has fundamentally changed. And I think with dictators, their history always comes back to haunt them. What you see in Libya today is simply an attempt to use legality as the frame of reference, if you will, to defend the current regime. You heard the Deputy Foreign Minister simply speak about the fact that the police and the army are in control of 90% of Libya. That is, in fact, the only frame of reference that they are using. It's not really the legality within the international community, but it is the fact that they believe that they are in control of 90%, or at least that's the message that they want to send to the rest of the world. But whether it is true or not, that remains to be seen.
Well, his frame of reference is a little more than that, isn't it? I mean, what he's saying is that there is an uprising by terrorist and rebellious elements in the countries that he needs to control. And every other country would, many other countries, shall we say, would take similar action in the face of what they would consider to be a terrorist threat and an attack on national security, wouldn't they?
I would agree with that if, in fact, what we have is a terrorist threat by a few elements. But the fact that you actually have uprising in many of Libya's cities, including even attempted takeovers in places around Tripoli. It's not only Benghazi that has completely fallen to the rebels in this case. And the fact that we're actually talking about rebels is just simply a reminder that when Gaddafi felt threatened, he simply insisted that he is going to invoke the idea of a civil war. That was the first thing that he ever did in a speech. He said, Libya will be engulfed in a civil war. It is a civil war of his own making. It's not necessarily a civil war that has been pushed on him, and he will indeed fight to the death from the perspective that he owns Libya. I mean, this is a man who is so divorced from reality, much more than Mubarak or Ben Ali has ever been.
Just very quickly, if there is a situation as you describe, how then should we interpret this diplomatic push? Is this negotiation from a position of strength or from a position of weakness?
I think it's just simply an attempt to reclaim relations with all of these countries who are, in fact, contacting the rebels and want to support the rebels publicly and privately. And I think that what Gaddafi is trying to do is to simply deny them that. I think it's very important to see here how many of these countries which have supported the uprising in Libya will, in fact, react. I don't really understand why is it that even though the Libyan government is so-called legitimate, in quotes, why is it that in Portugal or in Brussels or in Cairo, they will meet with the representatives of Gaddafi?
We'll leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for speaking to us. Live from California.
Thank you.
Now, Egypt's new government has warned of a possible counter-revolution after pro-reform protesters were attacked in Cairo. Fighting broke out in Tahrir Square, the centre of last month's mass protests that triggered the country's revolution. People camped there say supporters of the ousted leader Hosni Mubarak stormed the area on Wednesday, carrying knives, machetes and whips, and there were no police around to stop them. And meanwhile, Egypt's opposition figure, Mohamed al-Baradei, says he will run for president in the elections later this year. But he says he'll vote against the proposed constitutional amendments in the referendum of March the 19th. He says an entirely new constitution is what is needed.
I want the door open for everybody to have the chance to run for this, and I reject the fact that some very good scholars, very good people that will be deprived of this right. Also, this is, Article 75 it has a retroactive effect, which means there is no even that will be that's very unfair. These are the amendments that we do not agree with. That's why the amendments are fraud.
Tunisia is pressing on with its political transformation at what seems to be a faster rate than Egypt. A court in Tunisia has now dissolved the party of the president Zine El Abidine Ben Ali, who was toppled in January. Ben Ali used the RCD party as his way of maintaining power, and he ruled Tunisia for more than 2 decades. Nazanin Moshiri was with the crowd outside the courthouse in the capital, Tunis.
This is an extraordinary end to a party that once had a membership of more than 2 million people. These people say they no longer want to be associated with the remnants of Tunisia's past regime.
Now, pro-democracy protesters in Yemen say their opposition to the president, Ali Abdullah Saleh, has hardened further after the killing of another protester by government troops. Security forces opened fire on Tuesday night on the people rallying outside of Sana'a University. At least 75 people were also injured. The government says its action was prompted by the discovery of a cache of weapons. Now, you are watching